Welcome to the BizBros podcast. Another very exciting episode for our listeners. Again, we have got paired with a very cool guest. We both, all three of us, have in common portrait photographers in our past. So there may be some kind of photography metaphors in there, so get ready for that.
Get ready.
But today we have Jeffrey Shaw. He's a small business consultant, host of the top-rated podcast Self-Employed Life, and author of the Self-Employed Life in Lingo. And his TEDx Lincoln Square Talk is featured on TED.com. Oof, that's pretty cool. Dude. Also, for more than 3 decades, Jeffrey has been one of the most sought-after portrait photographers in the U.S. His portraits have appeared on Oprah Winfrey Show, People, O Magazine, and hang at Harvard University. Wow. Having been self-employed his entire life, Jeffrey is here today to share personal development, the need to increase their capacity for success. I skipped a line there. Jeffrey is passionate about helping business owners gain far more control over business and destiny than they ever had before. Jeffrey, welcome to the show. We are very excited to have you.
Right.
I'm excited to be here with you guys. Thank you for having me.
Already jaw dropped on your portrait work. Did not realize your work has been featured in so many places.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow. I'm definitely be dogging about that. I think that might be just a good way to introduce the show. So, Jeffrey, tell us a little bit more about your background as we kick things off, about who you are, a little more, again, about your background, and then we will hear about some of those accolades with the people that you've worked with from a portrait standpoint.
Well, you know, as you said, the thing we have all in common, which is so cool, because I don't come across too many photographers that have broken out of the industry, if you will. So I find that really exciting to meet you guys and you have a past as a portrait photographer. So myself, I've been a portrait photographer. So I'm on location family portrait photographer for 36 years. So I photograph entirely on location. I carved out a very unique business for myself. The background story is that I went away to photography school for a year at 20 years old and returned to my hometown. Now, I grew up in a small country town in upstate New York. At least at that time, it was a very small country town. And it's just a couple hours north of New York City, but a very different lifestyle, lower socioeconomic group. And I went back to that town thinking I was going to be a hot shot portrait photographer charging a lot of money. Charging a lot of money, because I think what we do as photographers has a really high value. And I think there's a bigger lesson in that for everybody, not just portrait photographers, but actually valuing what you do, really seeing what you do as being, life-changing for people or of great value. And I really held that. So with that comes a correlation with charging a certain amount of money. It's relative to how much you charge, because I was charging what I felt was a lot of money for that area because I wanted to be perceived as not just high quality, but valuing myself and my work. The problem was the area I was in didn't agree with me. So after 3 years of struggling, I had a failing business on my hands, and I was 23 years old, and I still had some financial commitments, but the bigger problem was this was my dream. This is all I knew how to do. It was the only skill set I had. I wasn't prepared or equipped to go away to university. My family didn't have the means to send me to college. So I had to make this work. So there was definitely a drive. And what I did is I kind of turned inward, which is where my ideas around self-employed life, my recent book, come from, is that every stage of my business that I have grown, I have first turned inward. I first have developed myself to say, what about me needs to change to live up to the next level of business? All right. So I turned to myself first and said, who am I? What do I value? Who will love that? And what I discovered is that I was really meant to serve affluent families. And I say meant because I got them. I understood their values. I didn't know their lifestyle. So then I set about studying their behaviors for 3 months. By studying high-end brands that the customers that I wanted to serve went to or bought from, I studied the behaviors of people that went there to unpack the psychology and behavior of affluent market that I knew nothing about. That led me now to a 36-year career that's been stellar, way beyond my dreams. And here we are today. I'm writing books and speaking professionally, et cetera.
So what was like
I got a lot of questions.
Well, what was like the tipping point of like educating others going from, okay, like you've had this amazing, fruitful portrait photography business that continues to grow. But what was it, the tipping point where you're like, okay, I'm going to change it up a little bit. I want to help others get to where I am and control their lives and control their business and really show like that anything is possible with the right, principles and systems in place.
As it often is with change, there's a convergence of a few things. One was I had a coach for 7 years who retired. And I just found having a coach to be an invaluable experience. And I hired a coach, back in 1999 when it wasn't even talked about, but I hired a coach at my peak years, so it wasn't that I was looking out for help. I knew that I knew that there was more in me than even what was showing up, even though those were peak earning years. I was doing really well as a photographer. Quite honestly, I found, it a bit lonely, to reach a certain level of success and not be able to discuss certain things with your employees and also trying to protect your private life so you're not bringing it home. So it ended up being kind of lonely. So having a business coach really addressed that. But I also felt, without a doubt, as well as I was doing, I was capable of doing even better. So I loved working with a coach. And when he retired after 7 years of working together, it was such a gaping hole in my life that I decided to fill that hole by doing for others what he did for me. So I started, I sought out coach training. I've received over 1,000 hours of training as a coach. I've never stopped receiving training as a coach. And then, people in the industry, photo industry, started coming to me and asking me to speak. To be honest with you, I had been very quiet about the level of success I had achieved in the industry. And when I started opening up about that, that's when people got curious, like, well, how the hell did you do that? So then I started, speaking at associations, etc.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. What are some of the traits that you've picked up along the way that you see these affluent families? You said you studied them for a series of years. What are some of the things that doing your studies, what did you pick up about them? And then I have another question that peels off of that, but let's start there.
Yeah. So really, everything I learned is the impetus for my first book, which came out in 2018 called Lingo. And what I wanted to help all businesses, certainly not just photographers. I wanted to help all businesses of different industries and all socioeconomic groups that they're serving and all geographical locations with this concept of understanding the lingo of the customers you serve. Now, what I mean by lingo is it's kind of the unspoken emotions. When you truly understand somebody's lingo, it's as if you know what they need more than they know what to ask for. Right. So when you really understand somebody's, let's flip it the other way. When you feel like somebody understands your lingo, you feel like they totally get you. Okay. So I wanted to understand my customers so well that they felt like I understood, even though I didn't come from their world, but with authenticity and honesty and genuine desire to understand people, I felt that a deep connection could be made. So there were so many things that I learned. I mean, that in the big sense is what I learned. What I learned more than anything is that no matter where you are today, wherever it is that you want to go and who you want to serve, it's up to you to do the work. I actually speak a lot at HR, human resources events, and I help companies recruit better employees, their dream employees. It's the same problem. Right. The same problem is that employers aren't taking the time to understand the mindsets and values of a younger workforce. It's not the younger workforce that's entitled or has an attitude. It's the people that are employing not doing the work to understand their values. Right. So it's the same idea. It's like anytime people don't get along, it's a communication gap. And a lot of people don't want to do the work. So that was the biggest thing I learned. Of course, there's nuances to the market I learned, like learning certain things about the way affluent people tick, that becomes the nuances of how you serve them.
Wow. And then the second part of that question is, what personality traits do you possess that you feel like blended really well with working with that segment or that niche? Yeah. So personality traits that you can call out that might work or might have worked well and led to that success?
I love that question because I think it can serve so many people to get what I'm about to say, is that the truth of the matter is some of you, and this is a really big thing for artists. The reason most artists, or, we can broaden that, probably say almost anyone, the reason people don't charge their full value is because they don't see value in what comes easy to them. We somehow are wired to get paid for hard work. you know, and as photographers, I'm sure you would relate that I would coach photographers that were wedding photographers charging tons of money because weddings are hard and they're stressful. They would want to get out of the wedding business and become portrait photographers because they loved what I did. You know, they loved the fact I did a few shoots a week and, you know, we're making a lot of money. So they wanted some, and they wouldn't want to charge as much because it didn't seem as hard. Like, it's not about hard, it's about value. Right.
Yeah.
So the hardest thing for people to see in themselves is what comes easy to them. So one of the exercises I do with my coaching clients is I have them make a list of compliments that they've heard throughout their life, anything and everything, and pay most attention to the compliments you just want to brush off. So oddly enough, for me, the compliment that I got in touch with, that people have repeatedly commented on throughout my life that served affluent people the best, is I am ridiculously organized and responsible. I'm always 3 steps ahead of everybody. You know who loves that? Affluent people, right? Because they're meticulous. Their homes are impeccably decorated. I also am always leading the way. You know, they don't have to worry about whether their greeting card's going to go out on time. They don't have to worry about the condition of the portraits I'm shipping to their grandmother because they know me and they know that nothing is going to go through without it being perfect. I'm so detail oriented. So it's a personal characteristic that I ended up leveraging for the people that I served that had a high value to them.
That's such a good answer to that question, by the way.
Hopefully that's a huge takeaway for most people.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Really, like, be ahead of your market. Know what they want, know what they need, and make sure the expectation is there so they don't have to think twice.
Yep. And kind of like you alluded to, it's kind of like running a business. Understanding, before you get into the business, you're understanding the consumer behavior,
right? Doing
a nice deep market analysis is a good business to go into. And then you go into it. Same thing here. Know your audience, know your consumer. And you're up with.
Yeah, I'd love to expand on that. The reality is businesses are built backwards. Right? Inherently, businesses are built backwards because people build the business. And this is the mistake I made with my photography business in my hometown. People build the business they want, and then they run around for years trying to fit people into the box they built. It's called marketing. It's called marketing at people. That's not the right way to build it. The right way to build a business is have a business idea. Make sure it's a marketable idea. Make sure it's meaningful to you because you're going to be in it for the long haul. Being self-employed is not, you know, for the faint of heart, right? So you want to be in it for the long haul and then do the work. Do the work to understand the people you're going to serve and then build the box that they already want. And then they'll jump in. It's shockingly easy to be in business after that because people are like, oh, they feel like their business is built for them and your brand message. This is how I developed my brand around my business around being a brand message consultant. Because then you need the brand message that speaks to that customers to let them know that, hey, I built this for you. They're in.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Work of art there.
So as you do your coaching and kind of consulting, do you kind of find you're another photographer production kind of agency area, or do you work with all kind of different walks of business?
All different. I probably, nowadays I probably work the least amount with photographers. Okay. And I'll be honest with you as to why. It's the few and I say this because I would love to see a change. There are very few photographers that have built a financially successful business for themselves that they can afford to hire somebody like me. And that's a shame.
See that,
right? That is, I mean, that's as brutally honest as I could be. And I've never been that honest before, ever. I don't think publicly to say the reason I don't coach as many photographers as I used to is because they're not in a financial position to invest at the way my rates have grown. And that's a shame. Right. So I'd love to see that change.
So much potential. It's like if they knew how to use that creative potential into the business aspect rather than just the camera, that's the fine line.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to kind of start diving into the nuts and bolts of the conversation. So as a business owner, things get chaotic, things get crazy, and it can be really difficult to kind of step back because you're in the chaos. It can be really hard to like lay everything out and see, how can I control this better? And I know that's kind of one of your key focuses and what you teach people. So let's kind of start diving into that. I'm a business owner. Things are chaotic. Things are good. Things are bad, up and down, roller coaster. How do you get out of that and start to control kind of your future destiny of what the business is going to be?
Yeah. And that's everything. I mean, that is the entire basis of my new book, The Self-Employed Life. And this is such a unique book. It truly is, because, you know, no one's ever written a book like this before. When I had the idea for the book, which suddenly became a very obvious idea because it's all I've ever known. I've actually never received a paycheck. I've never had a traditional job. I've been self-employed since 14 years old. Like, I don't know how it took me so long to see the obvious, right? This is this is how I can help the world. Yeah. And when I did my due diligence and went on Amazon and searched for self-employed books or books for self-employed, they were all about taxes. Like, lowest on our priorities, right? Right. You know, we're boring about taxes. This book needed to be written to address the problem that I had seen for decades. Every time I've ever asked anybody who's self-employed why they became self-employed, everybody has the same answer. You know, everybody has the same answer. It's some variation of, I went into business for myself because I wanted to control my future.
Just gonna say work for myself.
Right. Everybody says the same thing. I wanted to control my future. I want to control my destiny. I want to control the hours I work. And to which I look at them and saying, how's that going for you?
Right.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, there's this myth of self-employment that we're going to control our future without recognizing we're stepping into uncontrollable circumstances. I mean, the economy is going up and down, market trends change, competition, technology changes. And now we know that there can be an occasional pandemic to turn the world upside down that we didn't know about a year and a half ago. Right. So the world is uncontrollable. Here's the solution. And that's what my book, The Self-Employed Life, is about. The only thing you can control is the environment for the results you want. And I give you the tools to create the correct environment that will give you the greatest chance for your success possible. We can't control the circumstances, but if you control the environment, if you have everything set up the way it needs to be set up in what I call a self-employed ecosystem, you greatly increase your chances of success because you've got all pieces working. And I call it an ecosystem because it's no different. It's a business ecosystem, no different than an ecosystem in nature. Right? Anytime something is off in an ecosystem in nature, it can destroy the whole ecosystem.
100%. Just like a fish tank.
Right? Yeah. Invasive species, or ocean water is too warm, killing coral reef. Anytime here in Florida, we're having a problem with these enormous pythons in the Everglades that are like completely shifting and possibly destroying the natural environment of the Everglades if they don't get rid of these pythons. So we have python hunters trying to scoop them out of there.
Oh my gosh.
Okay? Same thing in business. What's the invasive species in your business that's putting it at risk? That's the question. And you need to look at how the environment is set up.
So without giving away your book, of course, what is like one example of a piece of the environment that needs to be like, just to get everybody in like the right mindset? Like, what's one example?
So let me give you I'll give you the triad, right? So there's three main elements of the ecosystem. Okay. Just like, you know, again, in nature, you've got oxygen, you've got water. There's certain requirements of a thriving ecosystem. Well, in the self-employed ecosystem, you have to have personal development, right-sized business strategies. And I should really stress the right-sized nature, because that's important, because much of the business, if not most of the business world, is very transactional. When you're self-employed, there's a 99.9% chance that your business is relationship-based. And when you're in a relationship-based business and not a transactional business, almost everything has to be flipped upside down. The world is not doing it for you. You need, you know, somebody like me has to come along and tell you almost everything you're doing has to be flipped upside down. All right. So for example, how many businesses give discounts for new customers, right? And not the existing customer? When you're in a relationship business, that's disastrous. You need to give a discount to your existing customers way before you make an offer to attract new customers. You're going to piss off your entire
already.
Right. You're going to ruin the relationship. So personal development, right-sized business strategies, and the last piece are daily habits that create consistent mindsets.
Oh,
that's probably. I actually provide. I have a Venn diagram. I have videos on this that actually offer the symptoms and what's the solution. Now, inherently, hardworking people are pretty strong on the business strategies. Doesn't mean they're doing the right business strategies. We need to correct that. But they're by nature pretty hardworking. A lot of people get the idea they need to put more effort into their personal development nowadays. Now, I don't know that they're doing the right type of personal development. So again, I think some changes need to be made there. Almost everybody is extremely weak on consistent daily habits that create consistent mindsets, right? We all say we want them. We all say we do them now and then, but there are certain practices that don't take up more than 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day, that doing them on a consistent basis rewires your brain to enable you to just stay consistent, so that the ups and downs that are inherent in self-employment don't derail you. And that's so anytime a piece of that ecosystem is off, there's literally a symptom I can see. Like I'll tell people, if you feel like you're all over the place, which I hear a lot, if you feel like you're all over the place, or you're working really hard and hardly getting ahead, it's because you're putting in a disproportionate amount of effort, hard work, and hours, disproportionate to your personal development. You haven't unblocked limiting mindsets. You haven't increased the capacity of what you think you deserve. You don't have your business set up for the right systems, for a place for all that hard work to fit. So you're just, it's like pounding into a wall.
Wow. That was huge. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That was so impactful.
The daily habits speak hard. Like that's, if you're not practicing on yourself and working towards that ecosystem every day, you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. I know that I feel that too. I try to be in the gym every morning, and the days I'm not in the gym is a habit that I have. I feel thrown off. I don't feel as focused. Yeah. And that's just one small little thing, but I definitely see what you're saying about that ecosystem being thrown off. Then the rest of your day can kind of go sideways.
Yeah. So when you start working with someone, do you kind of just dissect? Do you kind of like see exactly what, because I would imagine the way you work is probably through what kind of the system you've created. How do you kind of like dive in there and kind of see like on a daily basis what they need improvement on, or how does that kind of work?
So there's, first is about getting clear on, and this is again, turning your world upside down. It's not, I don't focus initially on getting clear on where they want to go. I focus first on getting clear on what they want to get away from. I have been studying motivation for years. And the conclusion I've come to is that the reason people don't see change through, if you want to change something in your life, you want to increase your business, the reason people don't see it through is because there isn't enough grit and motivation in a dangling carrot. There just isn't enough substance to a goal and a direction you're going in to keep you engaged. What keeps people engaged is getting really clear on what the hell they want to get away from. If you're tired of being broke, if you are sick and tired of not having enough, that will kick you in the ass, and that's what will get you going. And that has a lot more wind in the sails than where you're going. So I actually start with, what is it that you are sick and tired of? Why did you come to me? What is the change you want in your life that you do not want to see again? We get clear on that. Then we look at what's the path forward to that. Okay. But I keep my clients energetically in the space of what they want to get away from. I bring them back there when I need to. It's like, do you remember how that felt? You don't want to go back there. Right. So, again, having studied motivation for years as a coach, this is a really effective formula to get that. In order to get that wind in the sails behind you, is to really get clear on what you want to get away from, that the change that you really want in your life.
I love it.
So that you can set a plan forward to move forward. So I start there. And then after about a month, I have a very specific 3-month, what I call small business coaching program. So it's a very specific goal. So the first month is sort of that work. At the end of that month, we analyze specifically what each individual person's business need. Is it brand messaging? Is it a marketing plan? Is it social media? I mean, is it a new website? Right. I have the capacity to help, and usually it's a couple of things. It's a few things. And then we spend the next 2 months fixing that part of the ecosystem. Now, what I didn't mention is in the first month, we also set up their daily habits so that I can check in with them every single phone call. We have an assessment chart. How are you doing this? So that by the end of the 3 months, those habits are pretty ingrained and they're going to stick with them.
Wow. That's powerful.
That is huge. The first thing I thought about when you said getting away from the things that you don't want to be a part of, is that scene in Wolf of Wall Street where he's have you seen that movie?
I have not. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm not even going to go there, but where he talks about, are you behind on your mortgage? Good. Pick up the phone and start dialing. So it's like saying like, right, do not want, and here's the solution to that.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd highly recommend watching that, at least that one scene if you haven't seen it, because it speaks exactly to what you just said.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I agree with that. And, you know, it's an idea I've had for the longest time, again, in observation of what keeps people motivated. And here's how the idea really solidified for me is I living in Miami, my partner and I, we sea kayak constantly, almost every weekend. Yeah. And I started noticing there's so many business metaphors in kayaking, right? There's the whole idea of going, you know, you can, it's great when you're going in flow. It's great when you're going with the current. We all love being in flow and going with the current in life, especially in business. But you know what? The next most effective thing is to hit the current head on. The worst case scenario is when the tip of your kayak is slightly off current because you're going to get beat to the side. Right. So you either have to be in current, in flow, or you're hitting it straight on. And what I learned is I'm the front guy in the kayak. And what I learned is that if my partner stops rowing, we almost stand still, particularly in a rough current. Because, and it literally metaphorically is like everything in your life that you're dragging behind you. Because the fact matters is the front guy of the kayak, I'm pulling, and I realize how hard it is to pull. Like just the law of physics, it's really hard to pull something along with you when all the weight is behind you. Yep. What I also discovered is that if I could stop rowing and we stay almost on the same trajectory. Why? Because it's easier to push forward. And that got me to really comparing that to the root of motivation is the first, you need that push off in order to keep going. So it's always been a theory I've held, but actually kayaking solidified just physically looking at the laws of physics and current. It really solidified the idea for me.
That is so cool.
That is like
amazing analogies like that and metaphors. That's
and it's cool because it speaks to you. Like it was in like you were in the moment and noticed it. It wasn't just like some metaphor you picked from there. Like, that is so cool.
That is very
and there's so many, so many metaphors with business, with kayaking. Right. So the other thing is, again, we're out in the middle of the ocean. So there's usually an island we like to go to in the distance because we can pull up the kayak and swim. But in order to get there, rarely is a straight line. It's almost a long archway around the side in order to hit either be with the current or be against it. Because if we try to go in a straight line, there's a good chance we're not in line or against the current, which means we're going to it's so much more exhausting. And again, great metaphor for business. Rarely will you get to where you want to go in a straight line. It's probably going to feel like a diversion or a curve outward, but that is actually going to help you stay more either with the current or against the current, but you're going to get to where you want to go better.
Totally. And peeling off of that, there's a lot of unknown factors in the ocean that could happen during your journey. Like you said before, the pandemic, you don't really know what the environment has to hold. That's another way, I think.
Yeah.
That could happen. Before we wrap up here, Jeffrey, for our listeners, and in the intro, we kind of touched on it. Can you tell us a little bit about the interaction with Oprah and how that was?
Yeah. So what happened there was, and she's awesome, by the way. I did some family portraits for a journalist, an NBC journalist named David Bloom. Now, gosh, what year? I don't even know if I can figure out what year. I think this was like 2010 or so. But at that time, David Bloom was an NBC anchor, morning show. I mean, he was very well known. And I had just done their portrait, he and his family. I did their portrait. He had 3 beautiful daughters. I did the portrait in October. And that following April, he died covering the war in Iraq. And what he died from actually was from having been confined in the tank for so long. He created a blood clot, and the blood clot traveled to his lungs. And being in the middle of a desert, they couldn't get help to him quick enough. He was 39 years old, incredibly young. Now, if the blood clot had formed, and he'd been in a situation they could have gotten help more immediately, who knows? Maybe his life would have been saved. So since I had just done these portraits and his wife adored the portraits I created for them, she insisted that they be the photographs that were used to pay tribute to David. So the morning he died, I literally saw the news. I saw the report. I got up early on a Sunday morning. The report on the news is David Bloom died. Almost immediately, my phone rings and it's his wife on caller ID. I pick it up, and of course, it's an incredibly rough time for her. And she just says, "We need to get you to NBC. Would you be willing to, provide the photographs?" I said, "Don't even think about it." So NBC picked me up in Connecticut, got me down to the studio. I provided the photographs. Oprah picked up the whole story. She thought that was a very, heartbreaking story. She wanted to have David's wife on the show. Again, David's wife insisted that my photographs be the one featured on the show in between, as they featured on the show. Oprah's team calls me and wants to use the photographs. And, of course I'm going to say yes, but they said, well, we don't pay. And I'm like, well, Oprah can get away with not paying, but would you provide an airline ticket? Would you provide all travel expenses covered for me and my mom? So I figured I wanted to make my mom happy. So they did. They covered a whole trip for me to take my mother out to the taping of the show. Had 2 great conversations with Oprah before the filming and then after the show. And she's everything you'd expect her to be. She's just fantastic and dynamite. And and then those photographs are picked up. She used them again in the O magazine. And then People magazine did 2 photo shoots. And again, David's wife asked that I do all the photography. So I did all the photography for 2 different publications for People magazine as well.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you again for sharing that. That was an incredible story.
Well, that being said, if there was one thing for our listeners to take away that you hope that people gain from your message in a few lines, what is that typically? What is it you want them to understand?
Yeah. The people I care the most about are self-employed business owners. And I separate that from small business. I separate that from entrepreneurship. To me, self-employment is its own thing. It's us. It's us brave souls that choose to put ourselves on the line, work really hard, put our, maybe our name behind it or our reputation behind something. I cannot tell you. I mean, I get emotionally moved at the impact that has on me because I think self-employment is an incredible, incredible thing. And that's why I wrote this book. I wrote this book, as people are describing it now, as the Bible for self-employed business owners. There's never been anything else like it. I want it to serve as a resource guide. The thing that I want, there's so much that I want. I want self-employed business owners to kill it. I want them to rock it. I want them to have the lives they want. I want them to make business decisions based on how they want to live first. But I start all of that by saying, if I could say one thing at this point, this book is a mission for me because I want self-employed business owners to be proud that they're self-employed. When people ask you, what do you do? Say, I am a self-employed business owner, because it is worthy of respect.
Yes.
It tells people who you are, what makes you tick. It lets them know you've got grit and resilience. It's a badge of honor to say I'm self-employed. And I'd love to see more people use that more so than small business, more than anything. Just say, own it. I'm self-employed and be proud of it.
Oh my gosh. I love that.
Incredible.
So where can people find you, find your new book, follow you in your journey, maybe reach out for coaching? Where's the best place?
So, actually, I have a tool available, which anybody can get at selfemployedassessment.com. And this is new. This is actually a customized algorithm, which is going to enable people to answer a few questions. The algorithm will let you know where in the ecosystem you need to do work. They can get that at selfemployedecosystem.com. It's incredibly powerful. I'm so proud of that. I would start there because that will lead you to everything else. So selfemployedassessment.com. If you want more specific information about the book or anything else that I do in support of self-employed business owners, you can also go to the selfemployedlife.me. But I would start with the assessment because I think it's super valuable.
It's incredible.
I'm definitely going to share the assessment with others because I can think of so many people right now, including myself, that could utilize that.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jeffrey, for being on the BizBros podcast. We really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully we can reconvene down the road on another episode.
Absolutely.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And if you haven't yet, please follow us anywhere that you can find the BizBros. That could be Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and make sure to subscribe on any podcast marketplace. We look forward to seeing you in the next BizBros episode podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.